Hi everyone, this is my final project for art appreciation. My name is Kettlyne Lubin. This is the room number 6 by Eldizia Corridor. It is an artwork exhibited in the Art Institute of Chicago that depicts the American experience, specifically to the experience of Black Americans in the 1920s. The experience or story being told through the artwork relates to the housing crisis in Southside Chicago due to racial discrimination. Black Americans were left with no choice to live in poor housing conditions due to the strong culture of racism in America. Quarter depicts a similar situation to those who face this discrimination with various art elements. Quarter explores the use of unique proportioning, scaling, and shaping to depict the uniquely poor living conditions of Black Americans living in Chicago, which can be translated into the current experience of Black Americans with lower socioeconomic status in America. Quarter explores the use of unique proportion scaling. Um, I chose this artwork specifically because of the large historical context and the role it plays in understanding the artwork. Artworks made to provide creative visualizations of the Black American experience in modern and earlier times intrigue me. They have a tendency to provide strong emotional catalysts through their chosen elements of art. In the specific artwork, Quarter emphasizes proportioning, scaling, and shaping, and the use of color especially. Through this, Quarter tells an interesting and critically important story with his visuals. Even past the Fair Housing Act passed in 1968, racial discrimination regarding housing was still prevalent within many minorities, especially Black Americans. We can relate the message of Quarter's artwork to specific American experience from the past and current times. Quarter's use of shaping is one of the most notable features within the artwork. At first glance, we can see the main subject of the piece, an elongated woman carefully placed on the edge of the bed along with two children and another adult. All humans have exaggerated limbs and torso to further emphasize the space of the unit they are living in. The bodies are done with organic shapes, making a dynamic and fluid visual that emphasizes gestures rather than realistic body proportions. In contrast to the fluidity of the subjects in the artwork, majority of the rest and objects featured have sharper geometric elements. For example, the checker blanket, the rectangular floorboards, and the angled newspapers on the floor. All exhibit the contrast geometric elements to the organic elements used on humans. The emphasized space of the unit draws attention from audiences to further depict how small these kitchenettes were. This is important to the context of the Black American experience, not only to those in Chicago, but there was also a housing crisis occurring in many places throughout the states due to discrimination. Relating to shaping, proportioning also played a large role in the depiction of the kitchenette and Black Americans who were forced to cram with families of four plus. Quarter intentionally distorts the proportion of most objects and humans for a larger expressive effect. Our central figure, the woman on the edge of the bed, has elongated limbs that stretch across almost the entire plane of the artwork. This makes her the dominant figure of the scene, which is done purposefully by Quarter to further showcase how, no matter the size of all persons living in the cramped unit, they had no choice but to lie the way they did. Kitchenette buildings were the primary source of housing for Black Americans in Chicago, which is why it is so important to have the artwork with these types of depictions. It allows audiences to fully understand and have an emotional standpoint for these historical contexts. Compared to the other figures, the children on a more realistic proportioning basis, this is to contrast our central figure. By doing this, Quarter heightened the sense of compression and emotional intensity to audiences. The distortion shift the focus of realistic depictions to symbolic representations. Audiences can further understand the shift in just how great the deindustrialization of cities caused a divide in housing discrimination. Along with proportion, scaling was used to alter the perception of the space within the artwork. As mentioned before, our central figure is noticeably larger than all the figures and objects. This was done to emphasize her importance within the composition, perhaps a symbol of how large the struggle of discrimination was during the time of the artwork, relating to her larger proportions as an adult Black woman versus the children. The objects surrounding her adhere to more realistic composition, like the stove, toys, newspapers, and making the room feel cramped and slightly surreal. Scaling was varied throughout the artwork to place emphasis on the message being portrayed, how Black Americans face many struggles, with housing discrimination being a large one. It enhances the overall impact on audiences and directs their attention on the figures to the figures on the bed, the figures telling the actual story. Finally, varied use of color was also prominent within the artwork. Quarter combines warm earth tones with brighter contrasting colors. Deeper browns and red undertones of the figure's skin tone contrasted with the cool greens, blues, and purples of surrounding objects and surfaces. By doing this, Quarter created a dynamic balance between hues. The use of saturated color versus unsaturated color also helps audiences separate different parts of the room while also highlighting the figures' bodies as the emotional core of the scene. In The Room 6 in 1948 by Eldizia Quarter, he utilizes proportion, scaling, shaping, and color to comment on the Black American experience of racial housing discrimination, which translates to the modern Black American experience today. Through elongated bodies, cramped spatial relationships, and sharp contrast between geometric in organic shapes, Quarter provided a powerful symbol of the systematic inequality Black Americans experience. His artwork stands as a historical record, but also a visualization to evoke emotional understanding and responses from the audience. This is a depiction of the kitchenette and how three boys, similar to the artwork, were done. So this is just Quarter was making a dramatization of real life events. And these are what the kitchenette buildings actually look like from the outside. The units, as you can see, these were poor housing conditions. This is Eldezier Quarter himself, and these are my works cited. Thank you so much for watching.